How much will a Royal Caribbean cruise actually cost you? It reminds me a lot of like when you buy a car and you want to know what is the out-the-door price. There's the advertised price, but what is the true cost of going on a cruise? It's easy to be drawn in by the price that you see on the website for how much the cruise fare costs, but there's a lot more costs that go into that. And when you're budgeting for a Royal Caribbean cruise, well, I want to make sure you have the right information to plan for it. The reason why cruise fares are going to cost you way more than just the list price is because the cruises are very variable. How you cruise is different than how I cruise, and there's a lot of optional add-ons in there. So what's the average cost of just the cruise fare? Well, I want to give you some examples of the total, not per person, cruise fare of an interior cabin versus balcony cabin for 2 adults. A 3-night Bahamas weekend cruise in April will cost $700 for inside room, $1,000 for a balcony. But a 7-night Caribbean cruise in September will cost you $1,500 for an inside room and $1,900 for a balcony. How about a 7-night Alaska cruise in June? Well, that's $2,400 for an interior and $3,200 for a balcony. And if you're looking for the West Coast, well, a Mexican Riviera cruise in February will cost you $1,100 for an inside and $1,800 for a balcony. These prices are really just a guide and just to give you a ballpark idea of what to expect. The reality is every year prices tend to go up, and a big reason for that is demand. Demand for cruising especially has skyrocketed in the past few years because we've seen cruise lines report bigger and bigger profits as demand surges. Other factors like inflation, better marketing, and interest generated by new cruises definitely drive up the prices there. But there are other costs to consider when you're looking beyond simply the cruise fare, starting with taxes and port fees. You can expect them to cost about $100 to $200 per person, and you have no choice but to pay port fees and taxes. They're lumped into your cruise fare these days. It used to be like an extra add-on, but now Royal Caribbean's included it. So when you look at your final price when you actually book the cruise, they should be in there. And these are, of course, the government-mandated fees, so it's a necessary evil, but depending on the ports you visit, these costs can totally vary. The next cost to consider are gratuities, which for a standard cabin are $18.50 per person per day, and for a suite guest, it's $21 per person per day. Gratuities are charged automatically, and it covers the service you receive on board the ship. You can either prepay your gratuities before the sailing or have it charged every night of the sailing once on board, but gratuities are basically compulsory at this point, so you're either prepaying them or paying them on board. Personally, I prepay them, so I have less onboard charges. Another cost you probably can't get away from are transportation and pre- and post-cruise. Of course, depending on where you live and how you're going there, you can get to your cruise port for less than $100 if you live near the port, or thousands of dollars if you're flying. You really should consider this cost as like the number 2 cost in addition to your cruise fare, because depending if you're paying for flights, hotels, or parking, this can really drive up the price of your total cruise vacation. And then, of course, there are incidental costs associated with this as well, like meals along the way and buying a Jellycat that your kids definitely won't need, but they claim they want it. Everyone's got to have one, and their friend Camille has one, so I don't know. I bought one for my kids. Anyway, but I want to warn you, before you try to save some money by flying in the same day of your cruise, well, don't. This is a major mistake that can put your whole vacation in jeopardy. So come in at least one day ahead of time. Yeah, pay for a hotel, but figure a hotel will cost between $200 and $300 a night, plus airfare. Parking at the port, if you're driving, could cost about $20 to $30 per day. Now, next up, we have cruise add-ons. This is, again, very generic because there are a host of extras that you can add on the cost of your cruise, and they're all discretionary based on your preferences. There are shore excursions, drinks, specialty dining, spot treatments, Wi-Fi, and these are just a few of the optional add-ons I think a lot of people end up getting. Royal Caribbean purposely leaves these extras out of the cruise fare for 2 reasons. 1, it helps advertise a lower entry price for the cruise, and 2, not everyone wants to buy these items. Like some people might say, I really want to have a drink package on a cruise, and other people will say they don't. So rather than including the fare, they leave it up to you to decide. According to a Royal Caribbean Group financial statement, that the average guest spends about $90 to $100 per person per day on extras. So if you want to factor in that average math, there you go. You might be wondering, well, then how do they determine the cost of a cruise? Because there's a lot of factors involved. Certainly, which ship and how old the ship is going to have a major impact on the cost of your cruise. If you're going on a 20-year-old cruise ship versus one that just came out, you're going to see a major difference because you're paying a premium to go on a newer ship. Similarly to if you buy a new car versus a 20-year-old car, probably the new car will cost you way more than the old car. And that's similarly the same idea because the new cruise ship has more and newer and better amenities, activities, and entertainment choices than an older ship. And then, of course, there's the length of the cruise, because you'll pay far less for a 4-night cruise compared to a 10-night cruise. But there can be exceptions to this rule, like 3-night cruises over the weekend tend to be more expensive than 4-night cruises during the week, because there's less demand during the week for just a 4-night cruise versus a weekend sailing, which everybody can get off on. Likewise, a long transatlantic or trans-Pacific cruise usually has a much lower cost per day than, say, a 7-night cruise. Another major factor is, of course, the time of year, because cruising during peak season can see cruise fares up to double what that same ship and itinerary would cost in low season. For example, Caribbean cruises, you'll find some of the lowest fares between late August and early November, the first 2 weeks of December, mid-January to mid-February, and in May. And what do all those times have in common? Kids are in school. And then, of course, there's simple supply and demand. While there are general trends when it comes to cruise pricing, there are no set price rules. Supply and demand, generally speaking, in my experience, is going to be the king of what makes a cruise quote-unquote expensive or very affordable. But there's one thing we haven't talked about, and that is your cabin you choose, because depending on which type of cabin you select, well, that will really drive up or down the price of your cruise. Generally speaking, there are 4 types of cabins that are out there. An interior cabin is going to be the cheapest cruise cabin available. They don't offer a window and are usually smaller than other cabin categories. But you'll also find some great deals on inside rooms. You can expect to pay about $70 to $160 per person per night for an inside room. Ocean view cabins are the next step up from an inside room, and they feature a porthole window. Prices for ocean view cabins are generally priced about $110 to $197 per person per night. And then you have balcony cabins, which is the most popular type of cruise cabin available, with each cabin having a private outdoor balcony space. You can expect to pay between $150 and $250 per person per night for an ocean view balcony cabin, but there are other types of balcony cabins like neighborhood balconies and whatnot. And then, of course, there are suites, which are the most lavish accommodations. Prices really are vary considerably depending on the type of suite that you book, with prices from $250 to $420 per person per night for like a junior suite to like $1,000 per night for an owner's suite. And it goes up from there. Trust me, some of the biggest suites that Royal Caribbean has, like the Ultimate Family Townhouse, will cost $100,000 for a 7-night sailing for 4 people. And that's just the cruise fare, ladies and gentlemen. In my experience, the cost of a cruise is weighing what's included by Royal Caribbean versus what you want to spend extra. You can go on a cruise, spend very little on board the ship, and enjoy what's included without really breaking the budget, but it is really tempting to spend extra. I'm not talking about splurges like the spa or a cabana at Perfect Day at Coco Key. I'm talking about the little things that simply add up to the total cost of your vacation, like eating at a specialty restaurant, having internet access while you're on board the ship, or enjoying cocktails by the pool. These are things that simply add up a lot, but I think they're kind of core to the cruise experience, even though they're not included. But you should know what your Royal Caribbean cruise fare includes, such as your meals and snacks at the complimentary venues, of course, your cruise cabin, drinks like water, tea, coffee, lemonade, iced tea, milk, juice, and hot chocolate, continental room service at breakfast, Adventure Ocean children's programming, activities and shows, the fitness center, pools, and sun decks. Beyond that, you're on your own to pay for these items, and this is really where your cruise budget can go from like reasonable to like, wow, I spent way more than I thought I was going to. And you really have to have an honest conversation with yourself. Personally, I like to prepay for as much of these items as I possibly can, so that way there's no surprises at the end of the cruise. I mean, there still could be, but the more you prepay, the less you have to buy on board. And the nice thing also about prepaying is you can spread out those costs over time. I'm talking about alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks like mocktails or soda, fresh juices, specialty dining, whether you're going to go a specialty dining package or go to individual restaurants themselves, they can have cover charges or be priced a la carte. Also, Wi-Fi costs extra. I mean, the Royal Caribbean app has no additional cost, but if you want to use Wi-Fi in your cruise to be able to message somebody on like Facebook or something, check Facebook, the internet, email, all that, there is a daily charge for that. Once again, you can save a lot of money by pre-booking it. Shore excursions are another extra cost, and they're a major X factor because depending on where you're going, you could either skip a tour completely, do something on your own, go for a lavish tour. I mean, there are walking tours that are like $25. There are helicopter rides that are $400 per person. But a lot of the tours, especially in the Caribbean, most tours are about $50 to $150 per person. You can book tours directly through the cruise line or go with outside providers, with usually an outside tour being probably a lower price or including more for the price, I should say. But before you book a shore excursion through an outside company, be sure to review the pros and cons of not booking through the cruise line because there are some really nice benefits of booking through Royal Caribbean. Because Royal Caribbean, as an example, will have the ship wait for you if your tour is running late, but booking through an independent company, while often cheaper, does not offer the sense of security. Alternatively, you could choose to explore a port on your own without an organized tour at all. Just simply walk off the ship and, see where your feet can take you. That will cost you probably less, unless, of course, you run into jellycats. Oh, I hate jellycats. And then there are a lot more discretionary ways to spend money on a cruise. Things like the spa, fitness classes, laundry on board, wine and cocktail tastings, backstage ship tours, onboard childcare if you have a toddler on board or your kids stay beyond 10 o'clock at Adventure Ocean. There are photos, souvenirs, the casino. I mean, the casino alone could cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, depending on how you do go over there. And then, of course, there are costs at home, like maybe pet care, childcare, taking care of Tony Diaz at home. I mean, these are all costs that add up the more that you cruise. I'm hoping this video provides a bit of a reality check for you because the price of a cruise can truly vary considerably. But the good news is you'll almost certainly be able to find a cruise to fit your vacation budget, whether you book a cheap interior room or a lavish suite. A rough estimate is to expect to spend about $2,000 on cruise fare for a 7-night cruise for 2 adults, and this can be more or less depending on the cabin category, time of year you sail, etc., but it's a good starting point for your cruise budget. Of course, you'll have to add on the cost of transportation, gratuities, and all the discretionary spending once you're on board. But I really think a cruise, especially on Royal Caribbean, can be a fantastic value considering how much is included. Like if you're saying, well, I'm just going to go to a city nearby, well, don't forget you need to account for food, entertainment, and other things that are included by Royal Caribbean that simply are not included by a hotel when you go to visit somewhere in a city. Not to mention the fact that there's other transportation costs and other things involved, theme park tickets, and who knows what. Anyway, the point of this is to have a good budget and to be realistic about the other expenses that are going to come into play when you're planning a cruise. I hope you found this video helpful. Hit the like button if you did, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. That way YouTube lets you know of a brand new video to share. This has been Matt from RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com, and we'll talk again real soon.